My name is Frances LeBlanc. I will be facilitating the discussion today with our leaders on economic issues impacting women. This will be a bilingual event, so if you do need a device for translation, they are in the back, so please grab there you go. Great. I'd like to start by welcoming you on the Mi'kma'ki territory in Siknik, otherwise known as Moncton. These lands are covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, originally signed by the British Crown in 1726 and renewed in future years. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of land and resources, and like many, I'm also on my relearning journey of our history. May we move forward in sharing and respecting our collective histories as we are all treaty people. I would like to invite Angel Ward to say a few words.
Gwe, Nindeluisan Ansalewin. Hi, my name is Angel Ward to be exact. Delewi Metabanagia Geskabegia. I am from the communities of Metabanagia, which is outside of Miramichi, and Geskabegia. I do not identify as one because I come from both. Bijalasi, Delewi, Ilnuagadi, Wabanaki, and Mi'kma'ki territory. So we'd like to thank you and welcome you to our Wabanaki, because we share this land with our brothers and sisters, the Passamaquoddy and the Listoway. We'd like to welcome you to our territory here today. And just to honor that, I am from the district of Gaspé, which is the last land up northern New Brunswick and Gaspé Coast of Quebec. And we are now in the Sidnektuk district, which means the drainage of land. As you can see, this territory is always draining. So our people named it exactly what it does. So I appreciate the chance to welcome you on behalf of the Coalition of Pay Equity and its partners. As a coalition's project lead for Building Indigenous Partnerships in Pay Equity project, we welcome you together today to open your hearts and minds and listen and respect one another as we share perspectives with each other. A traditional teaching of understanding that was shared to me by my Giju, which is my grandmother, is to understand. It starts with the ability to listen intentfully. So I invite everyone here to listen with an open heart, a clear spirit, to fully understand the important messages that we will hear throughout this debate. And if anyone has noticed, I opened up the room and I cleared the room with a ceremony. And I hope that you appreciate that beautiful smell that you smell right now. That is our 4 medicines. And what that did, whether you recognized or realized it, it cleared your heart and your mind to be able to participate today in a good way, like how our people did prior to colonization. We made sure that we led our place in a good way. In order to do that, we need to be well ourselves. So we are working on that as an Indigenous people. We love and appreciate all the support. So Willalan, and thank you, merci, and welcome.
So this special forum was organized by the New Brunswick Coalition for Pay Equity in collaboration with 4 other partner organizations: the Common Front for Social Justice of New Brunswick, the Human Development Council, the Multicultural Council of New Brunswick, and Child Care Now, New Brunswick. This forum is to highlight the importance of women's issues, which thus far has received very little attention in the electoral campaign. The organizers wanted to ensure that we did shed light on these important issues, and as affordability is top of mind for many, the focus is on economic issues. On behalf of the organizers, we also wanted to thank Rogers, who will broadcast this event in the near future, so we will share the details on our social media once available. On that note, I would like to thank the leaders who are joining us today. We have David Coon from the Green Party, Susan Holt from the Liberal Party, and Alex White from the New Democratic Party. Unfortunately, in spite of numerous efforts by the organizer, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, Blaine Higgs, was unavailable to join, and we received an answer too late to really accommodate any change. So I'm going to quickly announce the format of the debate. Donc, pour débuter, chaque chef donnera une allocution d'ouverture de 2 minutes. Ensuite, nous aborderons tour à tour 4 questions qui ont été soigneusement choisies par des organisations partenaires. Les questions économiques touchent les femmes sont nombreuses, mais il fallait faire un choix. Des représentants d'organismes seront ici tour à tour pour présenter le contexte de la question. Et les chefs auront 2 minutes pour répondre à chaque question dans leur langue de leur choix. Ensuite, on aura une discussion de 4 minutes sur les thèmes. Et durant la discussion, on vous demande, s'il vous plaît, de parler un à la fois, parce que c'est très difficile pour l'interprétation autrement. Pour terminer, les chefs auront 3 minutes pour donner une allocution de clôture. Les gardiennes du temps, donc Jovial et Sophie, sont ici avec les cartes, donc on va porter attention. Et l'ordre des chefs a été déterminé à l'avance, donc ça va être David Coon, Susan Holt et Alex White, et là on va faire le changement une question à la fois. Il n'y aura malheureusement pas de questions du public à cause de le temps, mais certainement on vous encourage de, s'il vous plaît, rejoindre vos partis politiques qui sont tous très ouverts à la conversation. Donc, on demande aussi aux gens de la salle de ne pas applaudir nécessairement après chaque commentaire parce que ça peut quand même causer beaucoup de bruit, mais s'il vous plaît, juste réagir à la fin des questions et commentaires. Ceci dit, I'm going to sit down to start our conversation. And I have a timer, that's why I have my phone. I'm not being completely rude. Perfect. So to start, leaders one by one, I would like you to speak on your plans regarding economic issues impacting New Brunswick women. And you have 2 minutes. I would like to start with David Coon, and you have a mic available.
Merci, France. Walalo and Angel for your opening. C'est un plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Merci aux organisateurs pour votre travail ici. C'est très important d'avoir l'occasion de parler sur les enjeux économiques pour les femmes du Nouveau-Brunswick. It's great to be here. We have a strong platform that addresses these issues and other related equity issues. It recognizes the intersectionality of gender and race with economic and social challenges that women face across this province. Really proud of our fantastic team of candidates, and once again we have a gender balanced team of candidates that's quite diverse, including people of color, people with disabilities, representatives from the LGBTQ community in our province, an Indigenous candidate, and those who are part of the immigrant community. A Green government, right off the bat, will do one thing immediately, and that will address minimum wage in this province. It needs to go up, and we will ensure that it goes up to $20 an hour. Mais nous reconnaissons la nécessité de lutter contre le racisme systémique. It's absolutely vital that we attack systemic racism because it is one of the barriers to economic progress for women in this province, and it's absolutely essential that we take that on. I also want to talk about an issue, and we'll do it a little bit more later, but that really is a barrier to women fully participating in the job market. Now, we know that the lack of childcare spaces is that. But the other thing that sometimes isn't thought of is the lack of public transportation is also a barrier to get to work. If you don't have public transportation, if you don't have a way to go pick up your kids, then that is difficult. And I know people who are in that situation. So we will get into the details. I look forward to your questions, and I'll pass it on to Madam Holt.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Susan?
Thank you very much. I want to start by recognizing the organizers. We really appreciate that the Coalition for Pay Equity and your partners have given us an opportunity to get together and talk specifically about women's issues and women's economic issues during this election. So I very much appreciate the opportunity. I also want to take the opportunity to recognize a couple phenomenal members of Team Holt that were able to be here with us today. So I'm going to ask my candidates to stand, and I want to recognize Lynn Chantal Boudreau, our candidate for Chandaray Irishtown, Natasha Vautour, our candidate for Dieppe Mimbram Cook, and Claire Johnson, our candidate for Moncton South. Thank you all for being here today. Oui, c'est d'accord. Si vous voulez leur applaudir, c'est complètement d'accord. Notre équipe, avec ces 3 femmes puis plusieurs d'autres, on a des femmes nouveaux arrivants sur notre équipe et des candidats autochtones et diverses. Mais tous nos candidats écoutent au Néo-Brunswickois, puis on entend la même chose. What is that green one say? Half the time. That's 1 minute then? Okay. In that case, I'll go really quickly. A Holt government is committed to equal pay for equal work. A Holt government is committed to paying and valuing caregivers and making sure that we're caring for the people who are caring for us. Parce que c'est typiquement eux autres qui sont moins payés et c'est du travail vraiment important. On doit assurer que le travail qui est fait ici au Nouveau-Brunswick est valorisé. Et pour nous autres, le système de soins est clairement dans une crise parce qu'on a quelqu'un qui n'est pas ici aujourd'hui, qui n'a pas investi du tout dans les travailleurs, dans le foyer de soins, soins à domicile et les soins aux petites enfances aussi. Alors, j'ai hâte de parler avec vous de nos solutions. I'm really looking forward to talking about how we're going to tackle the healthcare crisis, the affordability crisis in ways that is inclusive and recognizing of the burden that women bear as primary caregivers, often as people who are less paid in this economy and who bear the brunt of our healthcare and affordability crisis directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And Alex?
Oui, merci tout le monde pour l'invitation. Je suis tellement heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui. Mon français n'est pas comme parfait, mais en tout cas, je pense que je vais parler la plupart dans l'anglais. Thank you so much for the invitation. I was thrilled even when this was just rumored, when I was approached by the Pay Equity Coalition that this was being proposed. I immediately said, I'll be there. I mean, this was, I believe, in August or early September. Then I said there was no way I would miss this. This is a very important topic, especially the economic aspect of what goes into recognizing gender and gender disparity and pay disparity and things like this across our province. The NDP is and always has been the workers' party. And when we look at economic issues, we can look at things such as minimum wage laws. We can look at things such as pay equity in all sectors of the economy. We can look at things such as, for sure, public transit, for example, which is a large part of our platform as well. We would absolutely make things easier, but if we really want to ensure that people can have an economic benefit from what the province can provide, we have to make it easy to access. We have to be able to give people the economic spending power, the economic ability, the rights and the privileges to be able to pursue and to be rewarded for their goals, their work. And 30 seconds already? Look, I talk a lot. This is really hard. I really have a hard time, but I'll have to wrap it up in that case. I'm really excited to be able to share with you our plans for what we have going on in the economy, the plans we have for the province in general, and the plans that we have that I believe that would affect the topics that we're going to be presented today in specific. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So, merci aux 3 candidats. On va passer à nos 4 enjeux présentement. Donc, j'aimerais inviter Isabelle Forêt, la coordinatrice du chapitre du Nouveau-Brunswick d'un enfant d'une place, à venir présenter sur le premier enjeu, qui est les services d'apprentissage et de garde à la petite enfance.
Bonjour, merci. Bienvenue. Comme elle a dit, je m'appelle Isabelle Forêt. Je travaille je suis coordinatrice du chapitre du Nouveau-Brunswick de Un enfant, une place, ou Child Care Now en anglais. Donc, en août 2024, le gouvernement du Nouveau-Brunswick a dévoilé son prochain plan d'action de 3 ans. dans le but de poursuivre la mise en œuvre de l'entente pan-canadienne Canada-Nouveau-Brunswick sur l'apprentissage et la garde des jeunes enfants dans la province. Des 3 400 places prévues dans le premier plan de 2021, la mise à jour de celui-ci a réduit le nombre de nouvelles places désignées dans les centres à but non lucratif de 2 400 à 1 745. L'accès aux services est également insuffisant dans les zones rurales ainsi que dans les communautés francophones et autochtones. De plus, les parents paient jusqu'à 21 $ par jour pour les services de garde dans les centres désignés. Pour les familles à faible revenu, cela consiste encore un obstacle, en particulier la capacité des femmes à retourner au travail. Donc, ma question au chef est: comment votre parti améliorera-t-il l'accès et l'abordabilité des services de garde et augmentera-t-il le service dans le secteur à but non lucratif?
Perfect. So we'd like to start with Susan. On aimerait commencer avec Susan.
OK. Merci beaucoup Isabelle pour la question et pour votre travail. Au moment, actuellement, en Nouveau-Brunswick, il y a 4000 personnes qui sont sur la liste d'attente pour des places en garderie. 4000 personnes. Je pense qu'on connaissons toutes quelqu'un qui met leur nom sur une liste d'attente le moment qu'elle comprend qu'elle va avoir une famille. Alors, on doit poursuivre le déploiement de la place en garderie de 10 $. Le travail doit continuer et doit continuer d'une façon beaucoup plus vite parce que, comme Isabelle a dit, c'est seulement à 21 $ au moment quand le but, c'est de réussir à avoir des places en garderie pour 10 $. Et ça, ce qui est déterminé que c'est un taux qui peut être mieux payé par les moins nantis. Alors, pour nous autres, on va renforcer considérablement la main-d'œuvre pour la petite enfance de 2 façons différentes. On doit changer les conditions de travail et améliorer les conditions de travail dans les garderies, grandement composées par des femmes, on connaît ça. Notre plan de rétention aussi veut dire une augmentation des salaires. Parce qu'au moment, le salaire moyen pour les personnes qui travaillent en garderie, c'est 18 $, mais la moyenne autour du Canada, c'est beaucoup plus que ça. Je pense que c'est 21 $. Mais on sait en Nouveau-Brunswick que vous pouvez être une aide à l'enseignant pour 25 $. Les garderies ont la difficulté à attirer un main-d'œuvre. Alors, un gouvernement Holt va augmenter les salaires pour les éducateurs et éducatrices dans la petite enfance. Et on va aussi fournir de l'aide financière pour que les personnes peuvent se former dans leur certificat et leur diplôme de travail dans la petite enfance. Il y a plusieurs autres choses qu'on va faire. Il y a une urgence d'enlever le fardeau administratif et législatif qui est sur les propriétaires de garderies de petite enfance aussi. Alors, nous allons régler que ce fardeau-là, ça fait que c'est vraiment difficile de créer une garderie et de continuer d'en avoir. Alors, on va améliorer la papasserie pour les propriétaires de garderies.
Excellent. On vous rappelle qu'il va y avoir aussi 4 minutes de discussion ouverte. Donc,
je ne vais pas mettre toutes mes informations dans une réponse.
J'apprécie beaucoup.
Tu m'as demandé de parler moins vite pour le traducteur, alors j'apprécie ça.
Justement, ben merci. Alex?
Alors oui, merci Isabelle pour la question. Et désolé tout le monde, j'ai juste mes notes sur mon phone ici. C'est pas comme je suis sur l'appel. Mais en tout cas, so the NDP would not only provide the full 3,400 spaces that were promised before, but we would add an additional 1,500 spaces of $10 a day childcare on top of this. This has been a promise that has been long in the arrival. It's been promised for years, decade perhaps, or even more. It's impossible. There was a campaign event in St. John, and I was there. It was just a campaign on the clock, political speed dating. And somebody came up to me, and it actually was a former colleague of my sister's. And she sat down and she said, "Alex, I'm about to have a kid, and I can't afford daycare." She said, "I need $10 a day childcare spaces." And I said, "That's right in our platform. It is something that we would do." I mean, I've heard it for years. The NDPs have been hearing this request for a long, long time. So not only would we fund it, we would stop redirecting all of the funds that have been supposed to be going to subsidized and public childcare spaces to for-profit spaces, which has been done under the Conservative government. we can look at prioritizing nonprofits to ensure that the money that does come in, that we can put towards these groups, will go to where it's needed, so that money can go towards salaries, towards higher standards of care, and provide the children and the parents of this province with the peace of mind and security that they need.
Thank you, Alex. And David.
Merci, France, merci. Un gouvernement vert, certainement, créera, avec le soutien du financement fédéral, 3400 nouvelles places en garderie, avec une priorité pour les régions rurales qui maintenant sont dans une situation très sérieuse. Aussi, un gouvernement vert fournira des prêts sans intérêt aux garderies coopératives et sans but lucratif. C'est très important pour nous. And we would also, when it comes to recruitment and retention, we would increase the salaries of child care workers by $2.50 per hour per year. So by the end of a 4-year term, those wages would have gone up by $10 an hour over the 4 years. This is vital to maintain workers in the child care sector, to attract workers into the child care sector. We've got to pay them for the value they provide, and the value they provide is tremendous when we're talking about both caring for our children and raising them in the educational milieu that is so important for young children at that age, as we know, while providing the necessary services for women and men to go to work. So the other piece here would be to ensure that we would have supportive services for those children who are neurodivergent, who have particular developmental disabilities. They don't currently get the support they should in childcare. I've run into this multiple times in my riding, even when it comes right down to children being able to attend the kind of camp in the summers through their daycares or Boys and Girls Clubs. The support isn't there, and it needs to be there, and we would make sure that the support is in place. Merci beaucoup.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm hearing some synergies, but we'd love to open it up for general discussions, ideally one at a time, so we can do the translation. Fortunately, we don't have a perspective from the Conservatives, but would love to hear if there's an additional comment. Susan?
Well, I can share some of the perspective that we ran into, because when the Liberal team was in the legislature, we were pushing the government to make available more spaces, and we had not-for-profit childcare facilities across the province telling us that they had proposals and opportunities to grow their care facilities, and the government was saying, oh, no, we can't. They blamed it on Ottawa. We eventually passed a motion that they agreed they would go to Ottawa and negotiate to be able to have more balance between private and not-for-profits, and we haven't seen any progress from the government on that front. We have seen some expansion of support, and I think this is an interesting one, support for childcare and healthcare environments. So we've now seen partnerships with Horizon and Vitalité and different childcare providers in the province to address that. But fundamentally what we need are more spaces funded by the government, because this wait list of 4,000 should be a wait list of 0. If you want to access childcare for your child, you should be able to have it, and it should be affordable. So we have to make the spaces available, and then we have to train people for those spaces, and we have to pay them in a way that recognizes and values the critical importance that early childhood educators provide to New Brunswick children, because we know those first 5 years are the most important, and children that get great structured support in the amazing daycare facilities and childcare facilities we have in this province do better in the long run. So we have to value that work and increase the wages for people delivering that care, and making sure that there are more spaces that all New Brunswick families can access.
Perfect. David?
The other challenge that I mentioned earlier is, while daycare spaces may be available near a person's home, a family's home, a woman's home, which enables them to get to work. If they can't actually travel to work, afford to get to work, they don't have a car, or there's only one car in the family and it's not available to them, they need to be able to get to work, and they need to be able to get back from work, especially in an emergency situation where they have to come and pick up their child when they're sick or ill. And so we don't have good city transit, we don't have good public transportation in this province. So that's why we have said that a Green government would invest directly in supporting the operating budgets of our city transit systems in our 4 cities, and that we would also support regional transportation systems through the regional service commissions around the province to provide the kind of Toonie transit system that exists in Prince Edward Island, which is very inexpensive but very effective. I've heard this at the door in my riding, going door to door, and it really hit home for me that women were struggling on the transportation side, so we need to ensure that access to work and the ability to get back and pick up their children when necessary is there for them as a public service.
Perfect. Thanks. Alex?
Yeah, so clearly transportation is one part of the issue here. I mean, sure, the NDP government would fund municipal transit. We would take that burden off of cities so people can get to and from work. But what I've been hearing at the doors, what my whole team has been hearing at the doors, is that it's the cost of living. And when we look at the actual expenditure that you could put into childcare and daycare, if it's even $20 a day, if you can go down to 10, which is where it should be, and where many places it has been for a long time, you're going to save hundreds of dollars a month. We're talking a very not insignificant amount of money. It could be up to $300 depending on how many days your child has to go into daycare. We're looking at professionals who do this job. We're looking at people who need these benefits. And we're looking at a situation where the NDP government would provincially fund all these spaces. We wouldn't have to go to Ottawa. We would fund these things. These are in our budget. We would force the price of these child care spaces down to $10 a day for everyone, period.
Thank you. Maintenant, c'est au tour d'Audrey Gagnon, coordinatrice du Front commun pour la justice sociale du Nouveau-Brunswick, à venir présenter un enjeu. Audrey?
Bonjour. Au Nouveau-Brunswick, le salaire minimum actuel de 15 et 30 ne permet pas de couvrir les besoins essentiels, surtout lorsque le coût de la vie augmente chaque année. Bien que ce taux soit ajusté selon l'indice des prix à la consommation, il reste bien en dessous du salaire de subsistance estimé à 24,62 de l'heure en moyenne dans la province, selon le rapport 2024 du Human Development Council. Cette réalité a un impact disproportionné sur les femmes, qui représentent 54% de la main-d'œuvre qui gagnent moins de 20 $ de l'heure. Les femmes monoparentales, les femmes trans et de la communauté queer, et les femmes immigrantes en particulier, sont gravement touchées et souvent contraintes de cumuler des emplois précaires. Pour résoudre cette crise, il est impératif de faire du salaire minimum un véritable salaire de subsistance. Votre parti augmentera-t-il le salaire minimum pour le rapprocher d'un salaire de subsistance en le fixant à au moins 20 $ de l'heure?
Alex?
Tout simple, oui, we would do that. This is a very simple answer. We've been asking for a $15 minimum wage for 10 to 15 years now. We just got it. It is a $24 living wage that we need in this province. So the NDP would take the first step, and over the 4 years, we would raise the minimum wage by $1.25 each year. So by the end, you'd be getting $20.30 for a minimum wage, with the goal of bringing that up to a living wage as quickly as possible. There's no reason that we should have to have people who have to work multiple jobs, who have to work potentially 3 jobs to survive. I know, for example, the cost of living now is so high that in my old apartment in St. John, I couldn't afford to live there anymore. I left at the beginning of COVID, and it's gone up in rent by 37-ish%. So if I even had the same job I had at the time, I couldn't live there. I have friends who are working 3, 4 part-time jobs sometimes, trying to keep a roof and food in their lives. It's unacceptable to have people making an amount of money where they can't work one job and be healthy and safe. It's reprehensible. It's beyond an economic issue, and it's a moral issue. People shouldn't have to devote their entire lives to work. People should be able to have their lives. That's what we have to look at. You deserve to have a life. You don't deserve to have 4 jobs. And a minimum wage of $20 goes one step towards answering that problem.
Thank you, Alex. David?
Merci. Bien sûr, si le gouvernement vert augmentera le salaire minimum à $20 par heure, c'est clair. But there's other improvements, though, that need to be made. When I think of minimum wage, I think of overtime, and those who are making slightly above minimum wage right now only get paid time and a half based on minimum wage. So if they gained a little bit in their income over minimum wage, they get paid time and a half on minimum wage. It's not fair. It's something we've tried to change in the legislature with bills we brought forward to amend and modernize the Employment Standards Act, like also ensuring that the Employment Standards Act provides, say, paid sick days for people, which aren't available to lots of people these days. They're absolutely necessary, and they don't exist for too many people. When it comes down to it, the Employment Standards Act is kind of, and the Legislative Assembly kind of is for those people who don't have unionized jobs, that's the place of last resort. The Employment Standards Act governs all those kinds of benefits, and it's in badly need of overhaul, and we've been trying to do that successfully. In the long term, we are working towards the idea of establishing a guaranteed livable income, and that to us would provide tremendous assistance for people to help ensure that they can move out of poverty and have a basic and necessary income to meet their needs and the needs of their families. So there's much to be done, and we are prepared to do what it takes to ensure that people have the income they need to meet the needs of their families and have a decent quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Susan?
Merci beaucoup, France. Merci, Audrey, pour la question. Clairement, nous avons besoin d'une augmentation au salaire minimum ici au Nouveau-Brunswick parce qu'il y a beaucoup plus de monde qui ne peut pas joindre les deux bouts aujourd'hui que hier et que 6 ans passés. C'est un enjeu qu'on voit porte à porte, comme l'exemple que Alex parlait. J'ai reçu un message Facebook d'une femme juste hier qui est une enseignante, mais femme seule avec 2 enfants qui sont dans leur dernier an de l'école secondaire. Puis elle cherche un deuxième emploi mais elle ne va pas être là dans les derniers ans avant que ce jeune quitte la maison. Elle est vraiment inquiétante et elle ne travaille pas même sur un salaire minimum. Alors, le gouvernement fait un examen au moment de l'indexation du salaire minimum au niveau de l'indice à la prix de consommation. C'est quelque chose qui est dans la loi qu'il doit faire à chaque 2 ans, mais il doit le faire dans 2024 et il fait ce travail maintenant. Alors, nous autres, on veut voir les résultats de ce travail pour déterminer la bonne horaire d'augmentation en partenariat avec les travailleurs et avec les entreprises pour savoir c'est quoi le bon horaire. Alex a décrit une. On veut savoir c'est quoi le plus vite qu'on peut atteindre ce but-là avec le travail que la fonction publique a fait, mais on a des propositions spécifiques pour augmenter des salaires spécifiques parce qu'on a déjà parlé que le fait qu'il y a plusieurs femmes qui sont dans le travail de soins, on va augmenter le salaire des préposés de soins et des personnes qui livrent un soin à domicile parce qu'on veut valoriser le soin ici à Nouveau-Brunswick. On veut aussi rendre la vie plus abordable. Il y a plusieurs choses qu'on peut faire pour rendre la vie plus abordable pour tout le monde. On va enlever un pourcentage de vos factures d'électricité. On va avoir des repas gratuits universels de petit déjeuner dans les écoles et pay what you can, paiement par volontaire de petit déjeuner parce que ça aide aux familles avec l'augmentation du coût de la vie que beaucoup de personnes trouvent vraiment dur au moment.
Parfait. Merci aux trois chefs. Malheureusement, on n'a pas de perspective du Parti conservateur encore, mais je vais ouvrir la discussion pour 4 minutes. S'il y a d'autres choses à ajouter, est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui aimerait débuter? Alex?
Alors oui, c'est pas seulement le salaire minimum qu'on doit augmenter ici. L'NPD a plusieurs choses qu'on peut faire. We want to give the earners in our province who most desperately need it a bit more earning power, a bit more money to put in food on their tables. We have a grocery rebate that is in our platform, which would result in those who make the HST rebate having that doubled for them. Because at this point, the cost of living crisis is so high that if I hear one more person tell me that they're going to have to struggle between paying their power bill and putting food on the table, I might literally explode. It just infuriates me that that's a thing that happens in this province. We can look at the fact that we would put out a universal to every person in this province $200 credit on their power bills, and we would do so by ending the subsidization of power to corporations and large businesses. There's no reason that the province should be giving them money when people aren't able to heat their homes. We can look at the fact that the New Brunswick Child Tax Credit is $250. That hasn't changed in a long time. It deserves to be at a significantly higher rate, and we would put that to $1,200 for the people in this province. We look at the low-income seniors benefit, which needs to be raised up to a reasonable amount. There are all kinds of other factors that we put in here, but we have to look at the fact that the minimum wage of $15, if you're earning just a bit above minimum wage, as a lot of people in this province do, as I did for most of my working life, they paid me 50 cents more, so they wouldn't have to tell me they were paying me minimum wage. If that's what you're earning, and the minimum wage goes up to $20.30 an hour, that should be what you earn from then on, period.
I think Alex makes a good point that you have to have both sides of it, right? We want to see wages coming up, but we also need to see pressures on the cost of living coming down. So that's one of the reasons why our team has put in place a rent cap, because rents are some of the biggest expenses that families are facing, and they are going up more than 10% last year alone in this province, because we have a government that refuses to put in place a policy that has been clearly effective in Ontario and Nova Scotia and provinces around us. So a Holt government is going to put in place a rent cap to help people with the cost of living. We're going to take 4 cents off the price of gas, which is the Higgs tax that he passed on from refiners to consumers. I already talked a little bit about our universal school food program and pay what you can lunch program that's meant to help with the cost of living, as well as an overhaul to the property tax system, because people are also finding themselves not able to continue to stay in their homes because their property taxes have been increasing so much. Those are pieces, but there's one more piece I just want to add, and that is a caregiver benefit. So we originally conceived a caregiver benefit to help people who are staying home with their elderly family members so that they could stay at home longer. And we wanted to recognize that caregiving and value it, even though it's invisible and informal. But that same caregiving applies to people who are home with young children. So we're going to put in place a $250 benefit per month to recognize the value of caregivers who are home with their family members. That includes people like my husband, who has stayed home to raise our 3 kids while I do crazy things like this. So we think that could really make a difference in the lives of a number of people who are struggling with the choices and maybe don't have the option to go onto the field of work at the moment.
One of the important things about rent caps, which we're all saying is necessary, is that the rent cap be attached to the unit, not just to the person, so that it avoids the situation of property owners who want to jack the rents up and decide to rent evict people out of their apartments. That would be avoided. So we need to keep those buildings affordable, and the best way to do it is make sure the rent cap applies to the unit. Energy costs are something that government can influence provincially, and one of the things we're saying we're going to do is not just get rid of the Higgs carbon tax, but the Trudeau carbon tax as well, and replace it with a carbon pricing system that's approved by the federal government, that's used by the government of Quebec, a cap and trade system that puts the emphasis on carbon pricing and the heavy lifting on the largest sources of pollution, that's heavy industry. And that will save between 7 and 10 cents a litre on gasoline in this province while we continue to fight climate change more effectively and more affordably. So these are the kinds of things we can affect, like home heating. So we would expand the threshold for free heat pumps and free insulation from the current $70,000 a year household income to $100,000 a year, so that more people will be eligible if they own their own homes for the free heat pump, free insulation, to get their heating costs down permanently and help safeguard them against power rate increases.
Perfect, thank you. We love a passionate crowd. Just as a friendly reminder during the comments, if we can keep the applause to a minimum, just because it makes the translation really challenging. I also wanted to keep the leaders on their toes and change the order of the questions. For those who know. But on that note, I would like to invite Shadwa Ramadan, Manager of Women and Gender Initiatives for the New Brunswick Multicultural Council, to talk on our next issue.
Hello, everyone. Racialized women face systematic racism when accessing employment in their field of expertise, which manifests through biased hiring practices, undervaluation of their skills, and exclusion from equal opportunities. In New Brunswick, racialized women encounter significant barriers to employment, including lower incomes and higher unemployment rates compared to other groups. The question is, what specific initiatives would you implement in the next 2 years to empower and support racialized women in finding meaningful employment in their fields? Thank you.
Thank you so much. David?
Thank you for the question. Well, right off the bat, we've got to tackle racism in a very serious and fundamental way. I've had so many racialized women in my constituency office over the last 10 years, desperate to find work, done their best, lots of experience, lots of credentials, and yet they keep getting turned down. They keep losing out on those opportunities, and one of the common denominators is pathetically the racism that runs through our society that is preventing them from getting work, preventing people from acquiring the kind of occupations and vocations that they're well trained for, well suited for, have lots of experience in. So that's why not only would we implement all the recommendations of the Commissioner on Systemic Racism, but we would quickly establish a secretariat in the provincial government responsible for tackling racism in all its forms. If you don't have anyone with that responsibility in government, nothing's going to happen, nothing. So we've got to do that. The other piece here is, of course, accreditation. And there's two other pieces. Accreditation, we need to fast track accreditation. That is a huge problem which we will tackle. But the final thing is we want to make sure that employers are required to advertise in their job postings the salary range so they can't mess around with women of color by lowballing their salaries because they haven't advertised them. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Susan?
Thank you very much. Certainly we see this. We see that racialized women experience additional barriers to finding employment and full employment. And so we have focused on a few of the things that David said. One of them is the foreign credential recognition process. We have to make it both faster but also more accessible. There are costs associated with it. There are barriers to that system, some of which is invisible racism. And so we have to change how the process of applying, what it costs to apply, and then how long it takes to get your credentials recognized so that people's full set of skills are appropriately recognized in New Brunswick. We also want to make available the training opportunities that reflect the workforce needs of today. So we want to make sure that we have key tuition grants and opportunities to study in fields of high need, particularly allocated to women candidates who might want to go into the skilled trades, as we know is an area of high demand, continuing on into healthcare and education professions that are in high demand, as well as technology careers. So we have to make sure that those scholarships and bursaries and programs are there that can bridge the gap to meaningful employment. We already talked about access to affordable childcare. That's one of the barriers that racialized women experience. And the final one that I'm going to suggest that I think could go a long way way is electing women to office and electing racialized women to office. So we're proud to have a woman of color and newcomer to New Brunswick as our candidate in Moncton Northwest. And I won't share with you some of the racism that she's experienced on the campaign trail, but imagine having our first woman premier and our first woman of color in the legislature and the distance that would go to diminish the racism in this province.
Thank you. Alex.
So most of you probably don't know this, but my actual last job was working on an NBMC project. I ran the Head Start to Employment program through the St. John Newcomer Center. And before that, I worked for the school district at the workroom. So I've been working with employment services for quite some time before I came to this job, if that's what we can call it. So I know firsthand, well, secondhand, the barriers that come up when racialized people come to this province and are looking for work. I have helped them craft resumes, I've helped them practice for interviews, I've connected them with employers, I've connected them with existing services like Working NB, like Pedal, like all kinds of other possible things, and they've still come back to me and said I can't get a job. And it broke my heart every time. That project lasted 8 months, I believe, 10 months that I was in charge of it. And by the end, it was off the ground in every major city in the province, and that was great. But if we really want to fight back discrimination in the workplace, the best and easiest way to do that is to make it easier for people to join a union. That's how you avoid getting discriminated against by your managers, by your employers. But more than that, we would expand pay equity, obviously, to fill the private sector. There is no reason why the private sector shouldn't have pay equity. Just doing that values women's work more, obviously. We would also ensure that some of the barriers that racialized women face and racialized people in general face are looked at and reviewed during our review of employment standards across the province, which is in our platform. We would comprehensively review the labor acts and the employment standards acts in this province. And much like Mr. Coon said, we would also ensure that the salary ranges are provided during all job ads so no one is caught off guard.
Perfect, thank you. I think the barriers are known, but we're looking for action at this point. The inequities are much more pronounced among subgroups, including racialized women, those with disabilities, First Nations, and so forth. So I'll open the discussion for the next 4 minutes. If there's additional comments you'd like to make, I see David is ready.
The biggest problem is there's no one to stand up for racialized women or anyone else who's racialized. It is a huge problem. Blaine Higgs doesn't see it as an issue at all. He hasn't acted on the Commissioner's report and recommendations on systemic racism at all, just ignored it completely. And Liberals have had the opportunity to take action in the past when they formed government, because we know Liberals and Conservatives are the ones who've been taking turns forming government over and over and over for the last number of decades, the last 100 years. And they've never moved on this. So what we need is action, and a government that will actually act, is committed to doing this, is committed to tackling the inequities, the discrimination, the bigotry, and the racism in our society, and not talk about it. The worst thing in the very beginning is when we're silent about it, when we don't talk about it, we don't dare raise the word racism in conversation. Don't dare raise the idea that we need to tackle racism in government and outside of government. It needs to happen. There needs to be a premier who is willing to tackle this face on, and not hide it under the rug. And to do that, we need some tools, we need some institutional capacity like a secretariat, and we need the political will to go right after it and not worry about losing some of your supporters or donors because they don't want you to be talking about racism or attacking racism and eradicating it in this province.
I think the Commissioner's work, Manju Varma's work digging into systemic racism in New Brunswick was an exceptional piece of work. And she put forward Commission's recommendations to a government and it fell on deaf ears. We have a government that has ignored even responding to the report or to make any commitment to act. And so a Holt government will act on the recommendations in the report on systemic racism that the Commissioner put in place. But I want to put an asterisk next to that, because one of the biggest instances of racism that we see in New Brunswick, certainly under this Premier over the past number of years, is the racism experienced by First Nations people in New Brunswick. And there were strong components to the report on systemic racism that were removed before the final version went forward, that didn't address the kind of racism that First Nations New Brunswick, people in New Brunswick face. And so we have to tackle both of these things, and we need leadership from the top. We can't have a Premier that's reinforcing the divisiveness and the negativity that we have right now. We need a Premier that's going to recognize the problems of racism, name them, address them, but then actually act, to your point, Francis. They have to act to move on the recommendations that were thoughtful, clear, and extensive and should be under implementation right now. We've waited too long to see the government move to implement measures for anti-racism in their hiring practices, in who gets to the top in government, and that's something a whole government will do. Thanks.
It's the common refrain, isn't it? Everyone tells government what they need and government just doesn't do anything. It's been that way my whole life. It's been that way longer than I've been alive. We've had governments come in, be like, oh, we have to address this. Let's study it. Let's commission it. Let's study it. Let's commission it. That's some great ideas. Let's think about it. No, we do have to actually implement the recommendations. And that is, again, a key part of our platform. But more than that, and as was noted, the racial implications to some of the First Nations in this province have gone unaddressed. There's been a cry out even for a public inquiry into systemic racism in the policing and justice system, and the New Brunswick NDP would implement and begin that process immediately, because there is no place in the 21st century in one of the richest countries in the world that we can allow systemic racism towards newcomers or First Nations or literally anybody to exist and expect that our society can thrive.
Thank you all. You can applause if you'd like to at this point. I can feel the passion, it's palpable, so certainly. Yeah, absolutely, you're doing very well. Thank you, and now I would like to invite the chair of the New Brunswick Coalition for Pay Equity, Raphaël Vallée-Nadeau, who will introduce our last topic.
Bonjour. New Brunswickers working in women-dominated jobs are too often underpaid for the value of their work. This has a disproportionate impact on racialized and newcomer women who are overrepresented in these jobs. Yet, this work is essential to the functioning of our society and deserves to be fairly compensated. To achieve pay equity, the value of women-dominated jobs must be compared with that of men-dominated jobs. Equal value, equal pay. Current pay equity legislation in New Brunswick applies only to the public sector. Due to the lack of legislation in the private sector, the right to pay equity is denied to people employed in private companies, nonprofit organizations, care sector, municipalities, and universities. This must change. Does your party commit to passing a pay equity legislation for the private sector? Thank you.
Susan.
Thank you very much. I could make this answer really short. Yes. But I won't stop there, because I'm proud to be part of a party that was the first to implement pay equity legislation in New Brunswick. And that was hard work, and it was a big deal when we moved for pay equity in the public sector. And then the commitment in 2018 was to take it further into the private sector. And unfortunately, we have now a government that refuses to do that. And they're not here to speak for themselves, but their votes speak for themselves, because our party also brought a pay equity bill to the legislature and asked for pay equity in the care sector. And the Conservative government voted against it. So a Holt government will put in place pay equity for the private sector and advance pay equity into the care sector, including not-for-profits. So we already talked about the wages that we're going to be increasing in those sectors, because it is critical that New Brunswick becomes a place that recognizes the equal value of work and pays people equally for that work, regardless of their gender. I'm proud to be part of a a party that has a history of success in this file. I want to recognize Joanne because she and I have probably had these conversations since 2012. There's been a lot of conversations, and I have told her at every turn, we are going to do this, we are going to do this, we are going to do this. I cannot wait to implement pay equity for the private sector as part of a Holt government.
Thank you. And Alex?
Again, this could be a really fast answer of yes, obviously. The NDP has had pay equity for the private sector in our platform for decades. It deserves to be there. It's been deserved to be there for a long time, since before it was introduced in the public sector, since before anybody was talking about any sort of pay equity legislation. The NDP has been advocating for this change. We've been pushing for this change, and it would be something that we would do immediately. And of course, I mean, my last work experience was all with nonprofits and with charities, and I worked with people where I came in and I got the most money. And that felt really weird because I was brand new to this project, and I was making more than people who've been working for the Newcomer Center who had been there for years. And so when we look at pay equity, we look at, first of all, raising the minimum wage, because most people who worked there weren't making what would be the new minimum wage under an NDP government. But we have to look at pay equity. We have to look at valuing the work that goes into these socially responsible sectors. We have to look at what nonprofits actually provide and value it appropriately. We have to make sure that pay equity in the private sector, whether it's nonprofit or corporate or what have you, entrepreneurial, it all has to be there. It all has to be equal, because the value that we all provide needs to be looked at as for what it is. It can't be looked at within jobs specifically, and it can't be looked at as some sort of apple-to-apple comparison or apple-to-orange comparison, because what it is we all provide value, and the value that we provide is what we need to be compensating for. So pay equity in the private sector, 100%. Nonprofits, charities, you name it. Pay equity across society is what we genuinely need.
Thank you, Alex. David?
Well, it's interesting, 65% of women in the labor force work in the private sector, so why are they subsidizing multi-billion-dollar corporations with lower wages than men are making? That's exactly what's been going on here for way too long. So it needs legislation, it needs government to act, and a green government would as well, as everyone else on this stage has said, act quickly to enact pay equity legislation that's dealing with the private sector. That's been in our platform as well since 2010 when the party was formed, and we're obviously committed to it. The forces that work here, are the things we've got to be concerned with. And it means that whoever forms the government has got to have the courage and the backbone to stand up to corporations that are wealthy and want to get their way in New Brunswick and not back down under pressure from the Irvings or anyone else. When they get wind of what is being planned, they move in and act and lobby and make all kinds of threats, frankly. So we need a government who's got the backbone, a premier who's got the courage to say, no, Mr. Irving, this is not in the interest of women in this province. This is not in the interest of the common good. Just no. And this man, David Coon, as Premier of New Brunswick, will say no as the Green leader here in this province.
Just for the record, we have 3 committed yeses, so thank you for that. Legislation for pay equity, wonderful. Would love to open it up for discussion. Any additional points?
Sure.
Alex?
So we do have to look at the fact that in this province we have a history of subsidizing large industries, whether it's by allowing there to be low pay, whether it's by direct subsidies from the government to industry, whether it be forestry, whether it be oil, whether it be what have you. We subsidize industries in this province because we have believed, or it has been believed by those in power for 30, 40, 50 years, that that's how you make the province improve. But I think if we look at the last 30, 40 to 50, 60 years, the decisions that have been made by successive governments and the things that have been advocated for and proposed and pushed for in successive governments they're what led us to where we are now, right? I mean, these problems didn't come out of one electoral cycle. They didn't come out of the last decade. They didn't come out since the year 2000. These are things that have been happening over and over and over and over again. And the fact is, government has not been willing to do different. They have been willing to do the same thing and hope against hope that it's going to wind up giving a different result. And it never does. Not once. So what we actually need is a government who's genuinely willing to get in there and say, we're the party of the people of New Brunswick, the workers of New Brunswick, the parents and the children and the employees of this province. And we're going to go and we're going to stand up for you. We're going to ensure that those people who've been getting these government handouts, that money should be redirected to the people of this province, because you're the ones who need it, you're the ones who deserve it, and we all deserve better.
Thank you.
I'd love to take this opportunity to share that I spent some time, actually, it was probably what got me into politics. I was the CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, and I worked really closely with the small business community in Fredericton, as well as larger businesses in our membership. And the business community in the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce was also made up of a lot of not-for-profit organizations. I then went on to lead an organization called the New Brunswick Business Council. And it was in that environment that I worked with some of the largest enterprises in this province and saw leaders who are committed to pay equity. I want to reassure you, I have said no to Mr. Irving before, face-to-face in the 8th floor boardroom of the Golden Ball meeting. Rest assured that a Holt government will advance pay equity in the private sector in New Brunswick if you give us the privilege of forming government.
Thank you, Susan. David, anything to add?
Well, this is one of these issues which is, people say a no-brainer, but we haven't seen any movement on it in the private sector whatsoever, despite the tremendous efforts of the Pay Equity Coalition and so many of those who've been on the front lines of this movement to bring about pay equity in the private sector. So it's got to happen, and I guess it's a question in the end of who do you trust to make it happen? And that's for you to decide, and we'll find out on October the 21st.
What an ending. Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much. Maintenant que vous vous êtes prononcé sur les 4 sujets ou les 4 enjeux, vous avez 3 minutes chaque pour présenter une allocution de clôture. Donc, on va commencer par David or Alex.
It's okay.
I lost track.
I'm so used to
I've
going
been
last.
outed. Thank you, Alex.
My last name, right? There we go. I feel like I kind of made my case just a moment there. But when we look at what's been going on in government, when we look at what trend we want to take this province, we have to actually understand that we can't do the same thing that we've been doing. It's not feasible. I mean, there's a government who cares so little about your opinions that their representative isn't here, right? There's a government who cares so little that they didn't show up. Didn't show up for the debates. I haven't seen him around Quispamsis whatsoever, and I live there. I'm his neighbor. He lives 4 minutes from my house. So when it comes down to it, we have to be able to take a look at what we want New Brunswick to look like. And I don't mean for the next 4 years. I mean for the next 10, 20 years. We have to be able to take a look at a medium to long-term strategy, a medium to long-term plan to improve New Brunswick's industrial plan, to support New Brunswick industries, to support New Brunswick workers, to make it easier to be in a union, to make it easier to advocate for yourself at work, to make it easier to say, I need better. Because we all do need better. There are people here who are on assistance. 35% of the province has some sort of disability. So we have to be able to raise rates. We have to be able to expand accessibility for programs. We have to be able to look at exactly what everyone genuinely needs and make the offer. We have to present it. We have to make it happen. There's no reason that I should be able to say that I lived in St. John for good half of my life, and Quispam Sis for the other half. And I lived in a place with the highest child poverty in Canada. I lived in the riding with the highest child poverty in the country, and also the Golden Ball, and also like the New Irving headquarters. We're talking about people who are on the list of the largest landowners in the world, in the actual world, and they are thriving while people in this province are struggling. And we provide them with free power. We provide them with tax breaks. We provide all of this sort of stuff. There is a fundamental need to reevaluate how government operates in this province. The NDP would come in, we would look at how things have been done, we would find what doesn't work, we would keep what does work. But there is a real need to make genuine change in this province. I've got people across this province from Dalhousie to St. Stephen who are advocating for their communities, who are doing everything they can to make things better on a day-to-day basis, whether they're union leaders, community activists, nonprofits. We want to be able to make it better for everyone. An NDP voice in the legislature is what New Brunswick genuinely needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Now, David.
Thank you, merci beaucoup. I want to start by recognizing the organizers and particularly for the work you do day in and day out, the Coalition for Pay Equity, Child Care Now, the Human Development Council, Common Front for Social Justice, the Multicultural Council. You all have been a tremendous source of inspiration, advice, and research for the work we've done in the Legislative Assembly over the years, and the work you've done to advance social justice on many, many fronts in this province is essential. And I know it feels like progress is slow, but without you, I don't know where we would be today. So thank you very much for your commitment to your work and what you do for the common good of all in the end. It's been in the House, in the legislature, it is extraordinary how happy some politicians and some public servants are with such minuscule incremental changes. Someone asked me the other day, a young person, can government be a change for good? Can it be a force for good? Can it actually make significant changes? And I said, well, I guess I've lived long enough to see that. Yes, it can, but not recently. Not recently. There's been quite a change over years in the role of government, where parties seem too focused on the next election and trying to score points off the other parties in the legislature and so on and so forth, rather than doing the job they were elected to do, to govern, to provide good governance, to uphold the common good in this province. So when you see incremental change and it held up as major breakthroughs, you've got to say something is wrong. What we need is major progress. We need major breakthroughs on the social front and on the economic front, and that takes an activist government. And we've done a lot in opposition, on the opposition benches over the last 10 years. We've influenced the Employment Standards Act and improved it with our bills. We've helped temporarily bring in a rent cap with amendments to the Residential Tenancies Act that got adopted, but for 1 year. So these things are positive, but they're just small changes, and we need much bigger changes to bring the kind of social justice that we want to see in this province, the kind of equity and equality we want to see in this province. So all I'm asking is to send us from the opposition benches to the government benches, and we will make those big leaps forward for you. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. And Susan.
Thank you very much. Can I get up? I'm kind of I gesture a lot, and so it'll be easier for me if I stand. I came here today because I wanted to share with you our vision for a brighter future for all New Brunswickers, no matter their gender identity, no matter the color of their skin, n'importe quelle langue ils parlent, n'importe où ils habitent. Nous pensons que vous méritez un gouvernement qui vous respecte et qui va prendre soin de vous autres. That's what Team Holt is going to do. And as I stand here, I want to reflect on something that happened this morning, because I was proud to stand up with my team and make a commitment to announce better access to women's health in New Brunswick, announce funding for IVF, announce that a Holt government will make contraception free, that we will expand midwifery services, and that we will provide at-home Pap tests for women across New Brunswick. And when we were finished, one of my team members looked at me and said, and she had tears in her eyes. She said, I never thought we'd be at a place where we would have a party running to form government, putting forward a women's health platform for New Brunswick. And then when I walked in the door here, I was challenged by one of my favorite people who said, we need to take those excellent commitments, and turn them into a strategy for women's health. Imagine if there was a government that was prepared to recognize that we need health services for all New Brunswickers, and that all New Brunswickers are not the same. Moi, je suis vraiment fière d'être partie d'une équipe avec Claire Johnson, puis Lynn Chantal Boudreau, puis Natasha Vautour, puis Tanya Sodi, qui va travailler ensemble avec une équipe pour réagir à vos priorités. On a un système de soins de santé qui est en crise, et on doit valoriser ceux qui prennent soin de nous autres. A Holt government will care for the people caring for us, and make sure we pay great wages to our early childhood educators, to our personal support workers, our resident attendants, nurses and teachers, and that we put in place pay equity, not just for the public sector, but for the private sector and the care sector. We are excited to tackle the challenges of affordabilities in ways that will benefit women who have been so often left behind, taking the tax off your power bill, universal school food programs, rent caps and property tax reviews. I am thrilled to be surrounded by a team of amazing people who want to advance this change, because we have a government that hasn't been listening and hasn't been focused on you. Notre équipe va travailler ensemble comme équipe pour gérer un Nouveau-Brunswick plus équitable. We're going to recognize equal value for equal work. We are going to care for the people caring for you. But this is a major choice. You have a choice in this election. There's two things that can happen. We can stick with Mr. Higgs and his wrong priorities, or you could make a historic choice and elect New Brunswick's first woman premier and a team of people who will care for you and be focused on you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, merci. So, thank you so much for being here. I've been hearing murmurs and rumblings in the crowd, so I know there's a lot of really great conversation happening. I recognize many of you, and I know you have really strong voices. The candidates, we have some candidates from all three parties here today. Please connect with them. This is the time to get your voices heard. And most importantly, go vote on October 21st. I know advanced pollings are also opening this weekend.
October 12th, October 15th.
Oh, perfect, there you go. So please go vote. Je tiens à vous remercier d'avoir été parmi nous. De tels forums sont super importants pour la démocratie, surtout les enjeux qui ont un impact sur les femmes. Je demanderai à Angel Ward de venir vous expliquer et aussi vous présenter juste un petit cadeau ou un signe d'appréciation.
All right, so I don't feel like standing at a podium because I really want to be on the level, so I can give this gift in a good way. So a little background of who I am. Yes, I do great work with the coalition. I'm a Mi'kmaq woman. I'm also a bundle carrier, which means that I carry medicine. And I have a specific role within my community as a medicine keeper. It's a very tough job. But the other tough job that I do is I'm also an Indigenous business consultant and a person that fights through the work that I do, driven by social enterprise and socially driven initiatives and projects in communities. So when I see the leaders today and they're talking about all the things that they want to do in our nation, right? I think that it's great. Every one of you have key messages that really, if you've seen my head, I'm sitting there bobbing and getting excited, and I think everybody else is too, because it all speaks really well to us. And in my space in my role as a business consultant, I do a lot of strategic planning, community planning. I've done a project with Susan Holt through PEDAL. We established the Future Wabanaki Experiential Education Program. So we've done really great work, and I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to do great work with these two fine gentlemen, but I will say I really enjoyed your spirits. So when I came in here, I did a little smudge ceremony, And I hope that that helped guide our discussions today and made everyone feel very at ease to open up in a good way. And because of that, the key messages were very clear, that everyone here loves our territory. I'm going to say our territory because it is the territory of the Wabanaki people, and we all love to share it, right? So with these leaders, I feel like there's an innate responsibility to understand the inclusion of Indigenous people as well when they're making those decisions, and the unique situation we live in here, and the opportunity to really build a path forward that is inclusive and respectful of our traditional ways and the way that we are. So another little fun fact about me before I give the little present. I'm also a professor. I teach for Cape Breton University. The last course that I taught was in February, and I designed the course around social Ilnu leadership, which means social Indigenous leadership. There's leadership models that are very Western, which is great. I rely on some of those models as well. But when we come down to Indigenous models, in order to be a leader in our territory, you need to be well. You need to be open-hearted, open-minded. So in order for you to be well, you need to know who you are, and you need to know where you come from. So our connection to our territory, our connection to who we are, is very important as we develop ourselves. So with that said, I want to provide a gift, and this gift is a medicine bag, and so it has our 4 medicines in here, right? And so this is more than just a medicine bag. When I do any speeches, if I'm having a hard time, I ground myself, and I smell this. And everybody at the coalition knows that I roll with that every day. It's a daily practice for me. If you notice I'm wearing a medicine bag tie, it's because I've lost a lot of people to intergenerational trauma, and their spirit is with me right now. So I'm carrying them for 13 moons. So I'm in ceremony right now for 13 moons. So this medicine bag is to remind you of your responsibility to protect the medicine that will continue to give to our generations, protect our people, and to include our people in your decision making. And understand that we have amazing Indigenous people that are willing to work and do the work to make this province, this territory, amazing and inclusive and prosperity, and just knowing that we're in this together is important. So for these gifts, I made 3 because I was told that the other party is not going to be here. And our teaching is, if you're not here, I can't pass the medicine to anybody else but the person. So unfortunately, I cannot give a medicine bag to go. So I appreciate you taking your time to be here with us to discuss these important issues, and just opening your spirit. And one last closing little teaching. So in this coalition project, we're doing really meaningful research about women and men roles. And how do we research that and incorporate Indigenous, knowledge in what women and men roles are? And the key message here, in order for us to move forward, the women need to be supported. Prior to colonization, our system was matriarchal driven. So we naturally have that feeling of love for our matriarchs. The men know their role in supporting the decision making. So I appreciate the men that are here today, that are doing what they can to make sure that we create balance. So balance and harmony is going to be the way that we move forward. So with this medicine bag, I just want to give you, I'm going a little bit on, but I just want to give this as a gift and a token of appreciation, and hoping that when you make decisions, you remember this responsibility. That it's not just for you and for me right now, but it's for the next 7 generations. Go
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Just a friendly reminder, this will be broadcasted on Rogers. We will share information on our social media. Special thanks to Rogers, to Sonic for technical support, as well as Yolande, our translator today. We'd also like to highlight the 4 or 5 organizations, la Coalition pour l'équité salariale, le Front commun pour la justice sociale du Nouveau-Brunswick, le Conseil multiculturel du Nouveau-Brunswick, Human Development Council, Un enfant, une place au Nouveau-Brunswick. Je vous rappelle... Je vous rappelle encore d'aller voter avant le 21 octobre. S'il vous plaît, s'il vous plaît, s'il vous plaît. Et ceci dit, merci aux 3 chefs. Merci énormément pour votre temps, pour votre ouverture. And I wish you good luck for the rest of the campaign. Take care. Thank you.
If I may just take a minute before we break, I just get a chance to introduce the Green candidates in the room as well, since you might be looking to talk to them afterwards. So Chantal Landry in the back, put your hand up. Danny Blanco. Danny is in the front here. Sarah Lord. Jacques Giguère. And Vincent Marola. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.